The rival Palestinian factions, Hamas and Fatah, have agreed to hold the first Palestinian elections in nearly 15 years. The Islamist group Hamas, which runs the Gaza Strip and which is considered a terrorist organisation by the EU, the US and Egypt, seized control of the Strip in 2007. Fatah, meanwhile, is the party of the Palestinian Authority and is based in Ramallah. Previous agreements between the two have failed, but there is a new impetus following peace deals between Israel and two Arab states. The election is due to take place within 6 months. We're here to talk about all of that. Our international affairs editor, Armen Georgian. And Armen, Fatah and Hamas have been bitter enemies, really, since 2007. How are these new elections going to work exactly?
Well, they are going to organise 3 separate elections, actually. So the first is for the parliament, the second a presidential election, and third for the Central Council of the PLO. So all 3 of those institutions need to be renewed, essentially. But obviously there are big questions as to whether an election will really change anything fundamental, because there has been this disconnect for a long time between ordinary Palestinians and their political leaders, a loss of confidence in those authorities, which is well known. And I think a lot depends, Laura, on what kind of candidates come forward for these elections. Will the candidates represent something new, or will it be more of the same? A big question also on the logistics of these elections. How do you organize them across 2 separate territories, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip? To what extent will Israel cooperate logistically? Of course, as we just heard from Iris Makler, there is this lockdown in Israel as well. So there are a lot of kind of unknowns at this point.
OK, and if the elections do go ahead, as the two sides say they will, within 6 months, will they actually change anything on the ground for ordinary Palestinians? Well,
it's interesting to look at polling on this. The Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research did a poll earlier this month, and I just want to show you some of the main findings. These percentages don't add up to 100 because I took separate questions and answers, okay? But I just pulled out the most interesting things for me. So 62% said a 2-state solution is no longer viable. So you might then think, well, do people want a 1-state solution with, equal rights within 1 state? Only 6% say they want a 1-state solution. Then in terms of negotiations with Israel versus armed struggle, not a huge difference, actually. 20% saying they favour negotiations with Israel, 28% a resumption of armed struggle. So I think the interesting thing about this is, while a majority say they don't think a 2-state solution is possible, there isn't any, one majority coming out for an alternative. So, armed struggle may be a slightly higher percentage than the other things, but that clearly is not a solution, and it's not the preferred solution. So I think this shows you just how stuck and divided, in a way, political opinions are in the Palestinian territories, according to this poll. And it's hard to see how the mere holding of an election actually really changes that division on the ground, essentially.
All right, really interesting figures there. All right, Armen, thank you very much indeed. Armen Georgian there.